You're listening to the Coloring Book Creator Podcast, episode 57. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about what to do, more specifically, what to do in your biz when you're not feeling it. Now, recently I was speaking with one of my private clients, and we were talking about, or more to the point, she was expressing how she was just not feeling very motivated. There was a sense of just not feeling connected to what she was doing. And we had talked about several projects that we wanted to implement together and had quite a few discussions about it and began to map out a game plan. And I noticed that when we would have our sessions that I could get a sense that she just wasn't enthusiastic about it. And there were things that we had decided on that needed to be done, and those things weren't happening. And so we had to have a really kind of a frank conversation. It was a good conversation, a very therapeutic conversation, but it was a conversation that had to be had to try to get, for me as her coach, to get an understanding what was really going on. And there was concerns that she had about subject matter, things that she wanted to make sure that fit with where she was personally, creatively, and so on and so forth. And while some great work had been done and is continuing to be done, the way that we were talking about things and positioning things was just not in alignment with where she wanted to go. And so it inspired me, that whole conversation inspired me to create this episode of the podcast, because I've been basically full-time self-employed since about 2007, when I really ventured out on my own full-time. And I've had moments when I've kind of slipped very temporarily in and out of being employed by someone else. For the most part, I've been full-time self-employed. And when you're first getting started in your own business, of course, you're coming into it because either you have a passion for something, a talent or skill for something, or an awareness or a knowledge of something, and you find that there are people out there independent of a quote-unquote W-2 job that is interested or willing to pay you for what you know how to do. And that's pretty much what it was for me. When I started out in web design, and I had a freelance, side hustle, if you will, before they even used the term side hustle, designing websites for many years. I did that. And then that graduated into me learning more about internet marketing, like in around 2006, 2007, more specifically around newsletter, email marketing, and that kind of thing. I always had a passion for writing. So that made sense to me, that I could write and create content before we knew content. I'm talking pre-Facebook. So I've been in the game for a while. And anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I had a photography business for many years. And then as I was working with my photography business and my photography clients more specifically, I began to befriend many other photographers and began showing them or telling them about all of these cool things you could do online. Again, I had a web design background coupled with my photography business and background and my writing background. So it was a perfect marriage to be able to fuse the visual with the written and then the technology. It was a perfect fit for me. And then what happened around 2008, 2009, we had the first economic crash and all of that kind of thing. And so you had to reinvent yourself. And I reinvented myself as a coach / consultant, using all of my skills in writing, content creation, and all of that to start offering services to, at that time, photographers, helping them get their presence set up online, helping them learn how to understand email marketing and how to use it in their business. Eventually, I got into blogging when WordPress came around. And so I'm saying all this to say is that we're always going to be iterating. Fast forward many years later, again, I'm still iterating. I'm still learning new skills and trying new things on and adding them to my portfolio, if you will. But circling it back to the topic of this particular episode of the podcast is what to do when you aren't feeling it. There are going to be times if you're in the game long enough, where certain things that you used to do, even though you may still be able to do them really well, they just don't light you up anymore. There was a prolific internet marketer, I won't mention by name, but I remember listening to her podcast years ago. And she said whenever she sensed that she was kind of done with something, like something she'd been doing in her business and she was kind of done with it, she got this feeling of restlessness. And that's the term that she used was she felt restless. And so I'm sharing this with you to encourage you that if you've been feeling maybe stagnant, if you're having a hard time motivating yourself, if you're finding that you're not being consistent, there could be a myriad of reasons, and I'm going to discuss several suggestions, 4 to be exact, that you can do to help you move through these seasons. Because if you're in the game long enough, you are going to have seasons. And what I mean by seasons is periods of your life when things once really worked, it felt right to you, it felt good to you, they no longer fit anymore. It's essentially like you outgrowing an outfit that you used to wear or things you like to eat or something like you outgrow things. Even sometimes people that we had in our lives at one point, we outgrow them. We outgrow each other. And so I'm saying it to you to say, don't feel bad about it. Don't feel like that there's something wrong with you. If you've been feeling like what you're doing is not connecting with you, it's not exciting you, you're not enthusiastic about it, you don't have to know all the details about what's next, but you have to be willing to, first of all, acknowledge that where you are right now, that something is off and you're ready to explore what's next. You don't, again, have to have all the answers. You don't have to know what the next thing is, but you do have to acknowledge the fact that you do feel a certain way about things or circumstances. Maybe it's the client you're working with. Maybe it's what you're offering, what you're delivering. Maybe it's what you're talking about when you're creating content. Maybe it is what you're selling. Maybe it's honestly, truthfully, maybe it's just being an entrepreneur altogether. Maybe you're in a season right now where you really don't want to wear all the hats anymore. So it might mean that you need to reevaluate what you're doing. It could mean that you need to bring on an assistant to offload things that no longer serve you to do. It's not the best use of your time. It could mean that you might need to maybe push your business to part-time and maybe do something else, full-time to replace the income. But the bottom line is you've got to be willing to acknowledge what is currently happening, because ignoring it only makes it stronger as time goes on. So again, as I mentioned a moment ago, I want to share 4 things that you can do to help you get aware and back on track when you're not feeling it. And the first one is, and I've already started talking about it, is number 1, don't be afraid or avoid admitting that you've been feeling off. Again, I've already mentioned this. But it's something that's really important because, again, we can't change what we don't acknowledge and what we don't admit. And so with that said, if you've been feeling that way for a while, even if it's something as subtle and kind of a nagging feeling, all the way to full-blown burnout, where you're just completely and utterly done. And I will say, if you're at that point where you are quote unquote done, you've been building up to that for a while. It didn't just start like last week. There's been a build up leading to this that you have not really been paying attention to. And so now when you're at the point where you're ready just to throw the whole thing out the window, it's because a period of time has gone by when you really didn't tap into and listen to yourself and be willing to take a step back and evaluate what's happening. And that leads to the point number 2. Don't be afraid to take time off. Now, when I say that, again, that's all relative to you, the listener, what it is that is most reasonable for you. Taking time off could mean as much as an afternoon, a day, a week, a month, 6 months, whatever it is. when we quote unquote give ourselves the opportunity to take time off, I want to clarify that a little bit more. Taking time off doesn't necessarily mean not doing anything. It might mean that you are going to unplug from certain things that you just kind of do by rote. I'll share an example with you. Again, as I mentioned earlier, pretty much before we started talking about content in the way we talk about content today, again, I'm dating myself, but I'm talking pre-Facebook here. I didn't realize that taking photographs as a photographer, or writing blog posts when I started WordPress blogging, or writing articles, or whatever it was I was doing, we didn't label it content back then. At least I didn't label it content back then. So being a content creator, of course, I felt it was my part of my education responsibility, keeping my ear to the ground, to consume content. So when things like webinars became a thing, and back then it used to be teleseminars, we didn't have video. It was all done, listening on the phone, but then we went into video and webinars, and this was also before YouTube really took off, and all these different things. Now we have everything under the sun with AI, more and more and more options to consume content, more than ever, more than any other time in history. Now, that's an exciting thing. I totally get it. I embrace it. I think it's cool. But in the same token, it can be too much, because we can spend so much time consuming content, whether it's social media posts, newsletters, emails, classes, Zoom calls, whatever the case may be. We can be so in the consumption mode and being in the consumption mode can feel like we're doing our work, like we're doing the things that actually move the needle in our business. But consuming content and creating content is not the same thing. And I want to illustrate it with a point. I listen to podcasts. I have a podcast, obviously. I have a YouTube channel that I'm trying to grow. I've got my coloring group with my students that I have. Coloring book creators group that I have, society program. I now have private mentoring clients that I'm working with right now. So I have a lot of things going on. And of course, I feel it's my duty to stay on top of all the things that are happening in my space, because I want to be able to help my clients and students implement it into what they're doing, or at least educate them about it. So in huge part, I feel I have a responsibility to be in the space of consuming content. But one day I noticed that I was trying to watch yet another YouTube video or something or the other. And I found myself now really not having the patience to watch a video in normal speed. Like, I'm finding myself going, now if you look at a video, and I'll just use YouTube in this example, you can do it at normal speed, but you now have the option to adjust how fast the video plays. So you can do 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2 times, and accelerate the speed. And I'd been finding myself accelerating the speed on the videos, because a lot of times I was watching a video or listening to a podcast, and I was wanting to get to the point of the content I was watching that was applicable to why I was watching it in the first place. And if I felt it was not happening fast enough, I was speeding it up so that I could get to the point. And what the point that was important to me, not putting down someone else's content. I'm saying I had an idea in my head about what I wanted to listen to based on the subject matter. I want to get to that part of it and then leave, the rest that wasn't applicable to me. But I found myself doing that over and over and over and over again. And I realized that I was consuming so much that I wasn't creating any of my own, one being the podcast. There are periods of time when I may not put out an episode for maybe up to 2 weeks, even though I want to put out one at least once a week, but sometimes I can go up to 2 weeks before I put an episode out. And it was interesting at that time, I was finding myself procrastinating about getting my episode recorded. I just kept dragging my feet about it. And in the middle of listening to get to someone else's content, what I was quite frankly becoming bored with, to be honest with you, I said to myself, I had a mental note, you're spending so much time consuming other people's stuff, you're not creating your own. And I immediately stopped what I was doing. I went ahead, I already had written an outline out for the episode of the podcast I wanted to do, fired up the recording software, and started recording my podcast episode. Once I did that and actually published it, I felt such a sense of accomplishment because I was not just in receiving mode, I was in action mode, meaning I was creating. So when I say take time off, I don't necessarily mean take time away from any of your business in its entirety. I'm saying maybe take time away from certain activities that you're doing. In my case, I was consuming a lot, but not creating a lot. So when I mean by take time off, it may mean to completely unplug from everything. Don't go on social media or minimize it. Just completely unplug, maybe get out of the house, go somewhere that shifts up the energy, moves the energy around. I'm a big fan of that. Going for a walk, maybe getting some exercise or whatever. There's all kinds of ways to take time off. So when I say time off, I don't mean just completely abandon your business into perpetuity. I'm saying that maybe put the pause button on things and spend that time sort of reflecting, maybe doing some journaling if you want to. Go do something outside your normal routine. Maybe go see a movie in the middle of the day if you haven't done that. Or go to the park, or I love to go to museums. Maybe go to the museum, maybe go walk around a gallery, maybe go meet up with a friend. But a lot of times it's not that we want to chuck the whole thing. We just have to be able to take a step back from what we're doing long enough to get some perspective. And it's in getting that perspective that then you begin to start to sense what you've been doing that's no longer working or feeling off to you, and what you should be focusing on instead. And so that could be a lot of what you quote unquote are not feeling. You're not feeling the things you've been doing and the ways you've been doing it. And it may be time to change something up. Again, I'm not talking about burning the ships. I'm saying just change maybe one thing. And again, a lot of times you can't get that clarity unless you shift your physical environment or at least mental environment in order to get some perspective. So number 2 is don't be afraid to take time off. Number 3, don't be afraid to try something new, experiment, explore, and dare I say play. I love what I do. I truly love what I do. I love creating content for my society members and my private clients. I love rolling up my sleeves and getting involved in what they're doing. I love creating content for them. I love my coaching calls with them. I love creating, I love creating. I love creating this podcast. I love doing those things. But I also know that if I want to keep things fresh for myself and enthusiastic for me, I also need to experiment and try new things. Now, at the time I'm recording this episode, I have just created my first GPT. I've known about GPTs for a while. I know about ChatGPT, and I've known that there's ways to create a GPT, but I knew about it, but I didn't really wrap my head around it. I just kind of I know that's something that I could potentially do. Well, recently I was looking at an internet marketer's website, and I'll mention the name is Amy Porterfield. I was looking at her website, and I noticed on the front page of her site, she has an opt-in lead magnet for using AI to come up with a course idea. As soon as I saw that, I immediately thought, oh, that would be cool to make an AI tool for people who come into my world who want to create a coloring book, planner, or journal. And so I immediately went to trying to figure out how she did it. Wasn't able to figure out exactly how she did it as far as the behind the scenes of the technology goes, but I knew enough to know how to create in the wheelhouse of what I knew, what I understood. So I created my own a GPT, and it's designed to help you use the tool to help you based on your interest and your subject matter, come up with an idea for a planner, a coloring book, or a journal. And I'll pop the link in the show notes. I'd love for you to go check it out if you're listening. And it leads to an audio course, a free audio course that I've provided for a while now on how to help you validate a coloring book idea. So again, I created this audio course, again, several months ago on how to validate your idea for your book. And that's been out there for a while. But what I liked about this idea of the GPT is because I think the technology is just cool. If you ever played with ChatGPT, then you know. I think it's kind of cool, but it's all based on what prompts to feed it. Well, I was able to program the GPT where you don't necessarily need to make up a prompt. I give you a description or a script that you can use that basically talks about your interest, your passion, what things light you up, your skills or whatever. Write that up in a way that you can feed it into the GPT and then have it give you not only ideas for a coloring book, a planner, or a journal, but also some marketing tips, some color scheme layout tips, also what the cover could possibly look like. And then that would then segue into the audio program where you can then help to validate the idea for your book. I'm going back to what I mentioned a moment ago about consuming other people's content. I saw, because I'm always looking, I'm always scanning the industry, whether it's directly in my industry or it's just outside my industry. I'm always scanning for new things. And I love collecting ideas. And when I saw this GPT that she did, my immediate thought was, I want to do something like this for my audience. So without knowing a lot about technology, I was able to put it together. And right now I'm in test mode. So if you're listening to this episode, I'll put the link in the show notes. I'd love for you to go over and check it out and then give me your feedback about it. So anyway, I say all of this to say is that if you've been feeling stagnant, stuck, burned out, whatever, maybe it's time to try something new. Maybe it's time to try a different offer. Maybe it's a different product. Maybe the way you've packaged it before and it's just no longer exciting to you anymore. Maybe you want to package it in another way. Maybe if you sell everything online, if you will, maybe you want to start doing some things in person where you're actually getting to talk to people, have face-to-face conversations with people. Maybe if you do everything in person, maybe it's time to take some component of it online. Maybe instead of doing everything on Zoom, maybe you decide to start a podcast or, what have you. There's all different kinds of ways to change things up. So when you're out in the world, experiencing things and exploring things and being exposed to new things, keep this question in your mind. How can I apply this to what I'm doing? If I offered to personally help you get your coloring book idea out of your head and into your hands in the next 30 days, using the exact same process that helped me create and publish my first book in 5 days, then leverage my status as a newly published author to launch and leverage it to create 2 additional income streams in less than 6 months, allowing me to make more money faster than relying solely on one-off book sales on Amazon or Etsy. And I did it with no formal art training or prior design experience. Would you be interested? Hi, my name is Rodney, creator of the Coloring Book Creator podcast. My first coloring book, Never Too Late to Make It Happen, inspired me to launch my first paid membership community and online course and coaching program that has helped over a dozen first-time authors create and publish over 30 titles and counting, while opening the door for a portfolio of additional income streams like launching a subscription box, landing paid speaking opportunities and offline teaching positions, and creating online courses and paid workshops. So the only question is, are you next? If you answered yes, shoot me a text to 415-851-1222. Again, that's 415-851-1222 and says, yes, I heard you on the podcast, and I'll respond within 24 hours with details on how to take advantage of this offer. Talk soon. And sometimes just asking the question, even if you don't know the answer, can help to draw into you the inspiration, the tools, the resources, or whatever it is that you need in order to fulfill or to be able to answer that question. I love the book. I've mentioned it several times by Dan Sullivan. It's not how, but who. I recommend every entrepreneur read this book. It will totally change the way that you think about thinking about your business and what you do. I already found something that inspired me. I wanted to find a way to adapt it to my audience. It's not exactly like hers, but I think that what I've done at least gives me the ability to be able to share a new way to connect with content I already had created, but I offered another doorway into it. It may work, it may not work, I don't know, but I wanted to at least put it out there. And quite frankly, now that I put it out there and I've seen it a little bit in action, it's reinvigorated me. So again, I would say number 3 is don't be afraid to experiment, try something new. Okay. Now, number 4 is one that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about because I think it's something that's really not acknowledged. And I am just going to share with you my experience. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 18 years full time. And there's a lot when you're doing it all on your own, when you are the cook, chief, and bottle washer, if you will, you wear all the hats, you're accounting, you're everything. And you still got family demands or whatever's going on in your personal life. You've also got now the responsibility for your clients or your students. You've got technology things you've got to figure out. You've got things you're trying to offer, things you're trying to sell, collecting payments, this, that, and the third. There's a lot of things going on. And in the middle of all of that, you still got to take care of the household, pay the bills, get groceries, and so on and so forth. And it's just a lot. Being an entrepreneur is a lot. It's not like a job where you can get off work, leave it at the office, and come home. Many entrepreneurs are burning the midnight oil. They're still doing things for the business. I'm always thinking about my business. Always. I'm never pretty much not thinking about my business and what things I like to do, what things I need to do, coupled with the fact that I've done it a long time. And again, I've still got family concerns and issues and things like that. Not to mention personal friends and so on and so forth. And then I'm concerned for my clients and my students and helping them, get what they need. So I'm wearing a lot of hats and it can feel sometimes like a lot of pressure. I'm setting this up to say that number 4 is don't be afraid to speak with a professional. Now, I personally, and I had a colleague of mine who I had great respect for, and we talked about coaching and the coaching world and so on and so forth. And while I love coaching, I think coaching is fantastic. I'm a coach. It took me a long time to wear that title, but I'm a coach. But also don't see at all where anyone would not get value having someone, not necessarily a business coach, but someone you can just talk to about how you're feeling. Because again, when you're an entrepreneur, we want to make everything about our business because being an entrepreneur is pretty much 24/7. So it's understandable. But I personally know because I have partaken in hiring a therapist a couple of times in my life when I really needed it. And I would say this, I think that it would behoove anyone listening to this to not consider having a professional person to speak with, whether it's a therapist or some equivalent thereof. Again, I'm going to recommend a service that I've personally used. It's called BetterHelp. I went to them a few years ago after my father passed away and was going through a really, rough time with that. And then before I was regrouping my whole life and starting my business in a new direction. and all of that. And I would say that time I spent getting that support I needed helped to get me realigned pretty quickly. Now, that was me. So I'm not going to by any means tell you that, you're going to have one or two sessions and all things are going to be fixed. It depends upon where you are, where you're at, and what's going on. All I will say is, while it's great to want to have a business coach or take another course or listen to another podcast episode or go buy another book or whatever the scenarios may be, all of those resources are available and help. But there's tremendous value in taking the time to speak with someone that doesn't necessarily have an agenda, meaning offering you something else to buy, but just willing to listen to you and hear you and hear what you're saying, maybe to speak the most candid and the most frank that you ever are allowing yourself to be able to do. And I just know for me personally, you can get that through therapy if you find the right person for you. So again, I'll recommend BetterHelp. I'll put the link in the show note description here. I'm not an affiliate of theirs. It's just a resource I've used. So again, there is nothing wrong with being in an environment or with someone that can support you hands-on, that will give you the grace and the space to be able to really speak your mind and how you feel and help you work through and process your feelings. And so that's why I left that for last. Number 4 is don't be afraid to speak with a professional. If BetterHelp provides you with that resource, check them out. I don't know what they're currently charging for their services. I think they have a sliding scale, but don't quote me on that. I don't know that for certain. Or maybe there's someone through your job. If you have a job, maybe there's someone through your church. Maybe there's someone, however you put it together, however you find it, I would say, again, going back to the Dan Sullivan book, Not How, But Who, if you're feeling like that you really need support, and you want to be able to speak candidly and freely without worrying about hurting someone's feelings or anything of that nature, consider finding someone that you can speak with very candidly. And if you don't know who that is, that's your ask. Who do I need to connect with that I can just be candid and speak to freely about how I feel about things? And I would be shocked if the who doesn't show up for you. Okay? So again, there is tremendous power in it. It can really help to reset you. I'm not saying you need to do it or be in a therapy situation all the time. I think there can be seasons for it where maybe you just need to kind of just check in and get some clarity and some realignment. Or there may be some things going on that need ongoing support. I just want to leave you with this and encourage you, whatever you need, whatever you decide, get what you need for as long as you need it. And if you don't want to tell a soul, for some of us, there can be a little bit of trepidation, maybe a little bit of shame around it. Me personally, I have no problem whatsoever telling anyone that I have enlisted the help of a therapist. I feel like nowadays, with so much going on, more and more of us actually could benefit from it, whether we want to admit it or not. But unfortunately, still around this arena, there can be a lot of things around shame and things like that. And I'm just saying to you, if you're listening to the sound of my voice and you've been feeling what I've been saying throughout this whole episode, if you feel like it's something that you need, check out BetterHelp and see if there's something there for you. Again, my experience with it was a few years ago, but you can find someone that's aligned with your values and your particular subject or what you need help with. And again, you can choose to keep it just for yourself. You can do it online. You can do it, at least it was when I did it. You can do it online with or without video. You don't want to, be seen or what have you. So it's confidential. And I found it one of the best investments I ever made. I would just say to anyone, even if you just, like I said, want to do a check-in, give yourself the gift of that if it feels right to you. All righty. Last thing, number 5, don't be afraid to change direction, even possibly burn the whole thing down. Now, I, again, want to be really clear about here. If you've gone through all the things I've shown you or walked you through, and let me review the first 4 again, just so that you have that level of clarity. So number 1, don't be afraid or avoid admitting that you've been feeling off. Number 2, don't be afraid to take time off. Number 3, don't be afraid to try something new, experiment, explore, and dare I say play. Number 4, don't be afraid to speak with a professional. And number 5, don't be afraid to change direction completely, possibly even burn the whole thing down. Now, I know that sounds dramatic, but if you're at this point where you've done all the other 4 things, and by this point, you should have a heightened level of clarity about what's working and what's not working for you. It may not be that you, quote unquote, burn down the business. It may mean you burn down the model that you currently are using. It could mean you change out the kind of clients that you are working with and attracting. It might mean that you do different products than what you did before. It might mean you totally change industry. You might change totally a different topic. It might mean that you may need to move to a new geographic location, which means that you may not even do anything in your business for a little while you make that transition. If you find yourself in that particular position, don't be afraid to do it. Do all of your checkpoints. Get those sessions in with someone that can help, that's impartial, that can walk you through. Okay, if you decide to stop all of this, what is that going to look like? And what are you thinking you want to put in place? So again, I put it in there because it may mean what's happening for you and why you aren't feeling it is because you really want to change the whole thing and you're just afraid to admit it to yourself because you don't know what it's going to look like. Circling back to number 1, we can't change what we won't admit. So if that's what's happening for you and you finally admit to yourself that the way I'm doing this business or the way I'm running this isn't working for me anymore, I need to look at what's next. You will then know who to enlist. Again, the who, not the how, then to help you course correct what is the next thing for you to do. Okay. Now I want to leave you with a couple of quotes that I really have set the pace for me in regards to my own self-examination process. And one of them is by one of my earlier business mentors, Barbara Winter, the late Barbara Winter, I should say. She was an amazing person that passed away about a year or 2 ago. And I remember her saying that the business you start will not be the one you end up with. If you're finding yourself needing to pivot, make some changes you don't know, that's natural. It's natural. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's just natural. You are evolving, as is what you're doing. Your business is evolving. So it would make sense that you're going to change things. I once heard being an entrepreneur is one of the best self-improvement development programs you'll ever take because it'll test every part of you. So if you've been feeling that, or in this case, not feeling what you're doing, just know that it's a part of the process. It's normal. It's normal that you're feeling the way you feel. Another one of my business mentors, what got you here won't get you there. So the way you've done things up to this point got you where you are now. And I don't say that from a judgment or a bad perspective or place. I'm saying that as you start to get more clarity about where you want to go next, what you've been doing to get you where you are now won't get you to where you want to go. You're going to have to change things and change yourself in a lot of respects. How you think, who you attract, how you speak about what you do, who you're calling in, how you work with them. All of that's going to change. So when we're starting something out from the beginning, we don't know what's going to work, what's not going to work. We don't know. We have to put it out there and see what works for us. And then we find something that works for us, and then things get to kind of chugging along. And then all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but then we start to notice that, okay, I'm ready to evolve to something next, but I don't know what that is. But what I will tell you is what got you where you are now won't get you where you want to go. But you have to get clear about what it is that you want, or at least have a feeling about where you want to go, because you're going to need to up your skills and your mindset in order to be able to do the things that you're going to need to do to elevate to that next level. So that's also a part of it. And again, this is all a part of the whole process. We have to be willing to step back enough to be able to feel what we feel, explore what's not working for us any longer, and then get the support that we need to shift focus and change direction. Both require self-examination and courage, both of which in all likelihood you have, or most likely you wouldn't be listening to this episode. Okay? So with that said, I want to wrap this episode by encouraging you to maybe listen to this again and get a little journal out when you're listening to it. I'd say get away from your computer or someplace, get out in the car, go somewhere and listen and really drink in what I'm saying. Journal about what's coming up for you. Check out the links in the show notes that I'm going to put in here for you. And if you feel so inclined and you want to share with me or ask me any questions about anything that I've shared, I'll put the link to my email in the show notes as well. And you can email me about it too. Alrighty. So with that said, I wish you well on your journey, and know that what you're feeling is really more true for you than not. So don't feel like that you are not cut out for something or that you're doing something wrong. What you feel is natural. When you have moments when you aren't feeling something, it means that something is ready to change. And you just have to be willing to admit that and then go about the process of doing it. Alrighty. So this is Rodney Washington, your host, signing off, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.